And welcome back to The Price of Business. If you enjoy this show, by the way, always go out to our website, priceofbusiness.com, where you can catch everything happening today, as well as all of our past shows. Again, Kevin Price is out making the world a greater place. I am Chris Kelso in his stead. Next up right now, we have Steve Kloyda. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris.
Oh, perfect. You know, we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart right now. We've been talking on the business show about obviously goal setting for 2015, but one of the things your expertise is in prospecting. Let me know, first of all, a little bit about who you are and what you do, and let's talk a little bit about prospecting.
Well, I started this company in 1990, and since 1990, I've been helping salespeople who struggle with getting in the door. Chris, let's face it, nothing happens until you get in front of a prospect or a client. Now, that could either be face-to-face, telephone, web demo, conference call, doesn't matter, but nothing happens until you get in front of that prospect.
That is absolutely true right there. You know, and that's obviously one of the biggest challenges that individuals have in today's market with technology and social media and everybody's so active, and more importantly, individuals within single roles having a lot of responsibility. It's something that a lot of people have challenges with, is getting in front of that right person to be able to make an impact or be able to drive forward a business activity or create a relationship.
That's exactly right. And that is the biggest challenge that salespeople face, because let's face it, you can have the greatest product out there, but if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter.
That is absolutely true. And, you know, let's baseline this a little bit. You know, how do you go about finding, or how do you go about showing somebody how to get into the door? I mean, what are some of your baseline or your basic activities that you tell somebody about or you engage with somebody about?
Well, it starts really with understanding where your prospects come from first. You have to understand where they come from. Prospecting is an organic process, and it happens everywhere. Your prospects may come from your warm or your natural market. They may come from referrals from clients. They may even come from centers of influence. You know, Chris, you mentioned social media. So once we understand where our prospects come from, then what are the tools that we're going to utilize to connect, educate, and engage that prospect? You know, when I started out in sales in 1980, all we had was a telephone. There was snail mail. We didn't have email. There was no voicemail. Today we have the phone, we have email, we have text messaging, we have video, we have social media such as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So once you understand where your prospects come from, then what are the tools you're going to utilize? I have customers that don't want to talk on the phone. They would prefer to have an email. I have customers that I can connect with text messaging. So once you understand how they want to be communicated to, then how do we approach them? And are we approaching them in a very clear, concise manner? I mean, if you look at the world today, Chris, that we live in, it's 24/7, and you have approximately 2 seconds to get their attention. The most valuable resource that we have today is attention. So what are you going to say, whether it's through an email, whether it's through a text message? I mean, look at what Twitter has taught us. Twitter has taught us it's 140 characters. If you can't communicate clearly what you do in less than 140 characters, people don't have time to read an email that's 2 pages long. So the approach is absolutely critical.
And it comes down to developing that, you know, and I don't want to use this as a cliche type thing, but creating that elevator speech. Is what can you do if you were with somebody in 30 seconds or less, you know, because I always like to dumb things down to more of those activities. What can you say in 30 seconds or less that's going to captivate that audience or that individual you're trying to speak with and make them want to have lunch, dinner, or even get a meeting set up with you?
Well, that's it. And you look at one of the greatest presenters of all time, Steve Jobs. He went on stage in 2001 at Macworld in San Francisco. He pulled a little white device out of his pocket, and he said 1,000 songs in your pocket. He didn't call it an MP3 player. He didn't call it all the bits and the bytes and the RAMs. 1,000 songs in your pocket. And, Chris, you bring up a very good point. What is that message that we're going to communicate? We have less than 30 seconds. Now, how you clarify or how you create that message is really done by understanding what pain do you eliminate, reduce, avoid, remove, and diminish for that prospect, and then putting that in a very clear, succinct message. Just like you asked me, what do you do, Steve, at the beginning of the show? I said, since 1990, I've been helping salespeople who struggle with getting in the door. It's clear and it's concise.
Right. And I always tell everybody you have to be clear, concise, and to the point, because in today's market, as you mentioned, attention span goes fast. You don't have a lot of it, and you have a very short time frame to get your message out. Speaking of short time frames, this show comes and goes pretty fast, and we are up against this segment. So, Steve, let all of our listeners know how they can reach you, if you don't mind.
They can reach me at theprospectingexpert.com. That is theprospectingexpert.com. I also produce a podcast every week. You can find me on Stitcher Radio or iTunes under Instant Sales Podcast, or just search for Steve Kloyda, and that's Kloyda.
Steve, thank you very much. Appreciate you having on board as usual. For all those listening, that was Steve Kloyda, the prospecting expert. You can reach him at theprospectingexpert.com. We're coming up against the break right now. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I feel fine.